This house is too big for one person, Mom. You should sell it and give us the down payment for ours. That was my son-in-law talking, not asking, telling. I sat at my own kitchen table, in the house I had paid off 22 years ago, and watched him lean back in the chair my husband used to sit in. He said it like it was obvious. Like it was already decided and I just hadn't been informed yet. I didn't say anything. I poured myself more coffee, set the pot down slowly, and looked out at the backyard. The dogwood was starting to bloom again. It does that every April, right on schedule, whether anyone is watching or not. My daughter didn't say a word. That was the part I kept coming back to later, lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. Not what he said. What she didn't say. I need to back up. My name is Lorene. And no, that's not a name I chose to give myself. My mother named me after a song she loved. I spent most of my childhood correcting people who added an extra syllable to it. I'm 68 years old. I taught high school English for 31 years, in the same district, in the same town where I grew up, where I raised my daughter, where I buried my husband. Hank died 6 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 4-month diagnosis to the end. He was 63. We had been married for 38 years. I don't say that for sympathy. I say it because you need to understand what this house is. It is not square footage. It is not an asset on a balance sheet. It is where we brought our daughter home from the hospital. It is where Hank built the raised garden beds in the backyard the summer before he got sick. It is where I still sleep on my side of the bed, even now, even 6 years later, because the other side still feels like his. My daughter, I'll call her by her relationship to me, because that's all that matters in this story. My daughter had always been close to me. Or I thought she had. She called often in the first year after Hank died. She came for holidays. She brought my son-in-law, who I had never entirely warmed to, but who I accepted because she loved him and I trusted her judgment. His name is Preston. I'll use it once so you understand who I mean, and then I'll go back to calling him what he is, my son-in-law. He sells insurance. He is very confident about things he knows nothing about. He once told me at Thanksgiving that teachers are overpaid. I smiled and passed the rolls. I had been doing that for years. Smiling and passing the rolls. The visit that April started normally enough. They drove up on a Friday evening, said they were staying the weekend. I made up the guest room, cooked a real dinner, pot roast, the way my daughter has always liked it, with carrots that go soft and bread for soaking up the broth. We sat and ate, and it felt almost like it used to. Then on Saturday morning, after breakfast, my son-in-law got that look on his face. The one where he's about to explain something to you. He said they had been looking at houses, that the market was difficult, that starter homes in their area were going for prices that felt frankly unreasonable. He said it with great authority, the way he says most things. I said that was hard and that I was sorry, and I meant it. Then he said it. This house is too big for one person, Mom. You should sell it and give us the down payment for ours. Mom, he called me Mom. He has called me that since the wedding, and I have never loved it, but I let it go. Another roll passed in silence. But this time I didn't smile. I looked at him. Then I looked at my daughter, who was staring at her coffee cup with great focus, as if the answer to something important was written on the bottom of it. I said, let me think about that, which is what I say when I have nothing else to say. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the word give, not loan, not help. Give. I got up around 2 in the morning and walked through the house in the dark the way I sometimes do. I know every floorboard. I know which step on the stairs has the soft spot in the middle. I know where the light comes in through the kitchen window at 6 a.m. and hits the counter at exactly the right angle. I know this house the way I know my own hands. Hank and I bought it the year our daughter was born. We were young and broke, and the inspector found 3 things wrong with the roof, and we bought it anyway, because it had a backyard big enough for a dog and a garden, and someday, we said, maybe a swing set. We paid it off the year I turned 46. We stood in the kitchen with a bottle of champagne and no glasses, so we drank it out of coffee mugs, and Hank said, "This is ours now, Lorene, all the way ours. All the way ours." I stood in the hallway at 2 in the morning and I thought about that, about what it means for something to be all the way yours, about what it means for someone to look at the thing that is all the way yours and say, "Give it to me." I thought about my daughter not saying a word. The next morning at breakfast, my son-in-law brought it up again. He had specifics now. He had done the math, he said, while I was sleeping. He told me what the house would likely sell for in this market. He told me what a reasonable down payment would be. He told me that I could use the rest to rent something smaller, something more manageable, something better suited to a woman my age living alone. Something better suited to a woman my age living alone. I set down my fork. I asked my daughter if she wanted more orange juice. She said yes. Her voice was small. I got up and poured it. I stood at the counter for a moment with my back to both of them. I looked out at the dogwood in the backyard. Still blooming, still on schedule. When I sat back down, I said, I appreciate you thinking about the numbers. I'll take some time to look into things. My son-in-law nodded like I had agreed to something. I hadn't agreed to anything. They left Sunday afternoon. My daughter hugged me at the door, longer than usual, and I thought for a moment she was going to say something. Her mouth opened. Then she looked over at her husband loading the car, and she stepped back and she said, Call me this week, okay? I said I would. I stood on the porch and watched them drive away. The street was quiet. A neighbor 2 houses down was walking a golden retriever I didn't recognize. I waved and she waved back. Then I went inside and sat down at the kitchen table and let myself feel what I had been holding at a careful distance all weekend. It wasn't anger, exactly. Or it wasn't only anger. It was something heavier than that. It was the particular sadness of seeing someone you love clearly and not liking what you see. It was the feeling of 38 years in this house, pressing down on me all at once. It was the memory of my daughter at 7 years old, sitting at this same table, doing her homework while I made dinner, completely at ease, completely safe, not knowing yet that one day she would sit here again and look at her coffee cup while her husband told her mother to sell her home. I sat there for a long time. Then I went to look for my husband's old address book because there was a phone call I needed to make. His name was Mr. Okafor, my attorney. I had worked with him once before when Hank died to settle the estate. He was a quiet man, careful with words, which I appreciated. I made an appointment for the following Thursday. I didn't tell my daughter I was going. I didn't tell her much of anything that week. She called on Tuesday, as she usually does, and we talked about ordinary things. Her job, the weather, a television show she had been watching. She didn't mention the weekend. I didn't either. I was learning something that week. I was learning the difference between waiting and deciding. I had spent the weekend in a kind of suspended state, waiting to feel clear, waiting to know what was right. But sitting in my kitchen on a Tuesday night, listening to my daughter talk about a television show, I realized that I already knew. I had known since Saturday morning. I had just been giving myself time to accept it. Mr. Okafor's office was in a low brick building on the east side of town, the kind of building that looks like it has always been there and intends to remain. I sat across from him, at his desk, with a pad of paper and a pen, the way I used to sit in meetings at school, and I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to update my will. I wanted to establish a trust for the house specifically, structured so that it could not be sold, transferred, or otherwise disposed of during my lifetime without my sole authorization, and after my death, would pass not to my daughter directly, but to a charitable foundation I had always supported, a literacy nonprofit that worked in underfunded schools in our state. I had been donating to them for years, small amounts, the kind that add up quietly. I also wanted to remove my son-in-law's name from the emergency contact I had listed with my doctor's office and 2 financial institutions. He had been added years ago, casually, the way you add someone because they're family and it seems like the right thing to do. It no longer seemed like the right thing to do. Mr. Okafor asked me several careful questions. He was not surprised by what I was asking, which I appreciated. He had seen things like this before, I could tell. He didn't editorialize. He just took notes and told me what the process would look like, and what it would cost, and when it could be completed. I signed the initial paperwork that afternoon. Walking out of his office into the April sunshine, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, not grief, but a very quiet steadiness. Like a door closing softly on a room that had been drafty for years. My daughter called the following Monday. She led with small talk, but I could tell she was working up to something. After about 10 minutes, she said, "Have you thought any more about what we discussed? About the house?" I had been ready for this. I said, "I've made some decisions about the house, yes." She asked what that meant. I told her I had updated my will and set up a trust. I told her the house would go to the Literacy Foundation when I was done with it. I told her I wasn't done with it. The silence on the line was long enough that I looked at my phone to make sure the call was still connected. Then she said, "Mom." Just that. Just my name. I waited. She said, "We need that money." I said, "I know that's how it feels." She said, "This isn't fair." And I thought, fair. I thought about 31 years of teaching. I thought about Hank working nights for 6 years so we could save enough to put 20% down. I thought about the winter we kept the heat at 61 degrees because we had miscalculated the furnace repair and had to choose between that and the mortgage. I thought about all the ways this house had been earned, slowly in increments too small to be dramatic. the way most real things are earned. I said, I'm not angry with you, but this house is mine. Your father and I built this together, and I intend to decide what happens to it. She was crying. I could hear it. It broke something in me. Hearing it, I want to be honest about that. I did not enjoy that phone call. There was nothing satisfying about it. My daughter was crying, and I was the reason, and that is not a thing a mother stops feeling just because she knows she's right. I said, I love you. That doesn't change. She said she had to go. She hung up. The dogwood bloomed through April, and then it was May, and then the summer came on slow and heavy the way summers do here. I planted tomatoes in Hank's raised beds. I had a neighbor's granddaughter come over on Tuesdays to help with the heavier weeding, a girl named, well, I'll call her the girl down the street, because she's 17 and this isn't her story. She reminded me of my daughter at that age. Serious, careful, quiet, until she wasn't. My daughter and I didn't speak for 6 weeks after that phone call. 6 weeks is a long time. I won't pretend it wasn't. She called in June. She didn't mention the house. We talked for 40 minutes about her job and my tomatoes and a funny thing that had happened at her gym. Before she hung up, she said, I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't handle it well. She didn't say which part. I didn't ask her to specify. I said, I know, I love you. We have been talking every week since. Her husband and I do not discuss real estate. He calls me Mom, and I let him, because some hills are not worth the climb, and because my daughter loves him, and because I am 68 years old, and I know the difference now between the battles that matter and the ones that are just noise. But I want to tell you something about the months after that. I was alone, yes. The house was big, yes. Bigger than one person needs, anyone can see that. There were evenings when I sat in the living room and the quiet pressed in from all sides and I missed Hank with a force that surprised me still. 6 years out. Some griefs don't shrink, they just become more familiar. But I also planted things and watched them grow. I had coffee with a friend I had let fall out of touch. A woman I taught with for 15 years, who retired a year before I did, who came over one Saturday morning and sat at my kitchen table for 3 hours, and we laughed until we were both embarrassed about it. I walked in the evenings when the light went long and gold. I read books I had been meaning to read for years. I started writing a little. Nothing I would show anyone, just the habit of putting words to things, which I had always told my students was the best way to understand what you actually thought. I thought a lot. I thought about what it means to earn something slowly and protect it quietly, about the difference between generosity and surrender, about how much of my life I had spent making space for other people's comfort at the cost of my own, about my husband who always said, Lorene, you're too good at swallowing things. He was right. He was almost always right about me. I am done swallowing things. The trust is finalized now. The house is mine, and after me it will do some good in the world. It will go toward books and reading programs and kids in schools who are where my students were, who need someone to hand them a story and say, this one is yours, go. That feels right. That feels like something Hank would have liked. My daughter visited in September without her husband. She brought wine, and we sat on the back porch in the evening and watched the fireflies come up from the grass. She asked if she could see the raised beds. I showed her. She knelt down and touched the soil the way she used to when she was small and her father let her help. She said, I miss him. I said, I know, me too. We didn't say much else. We didn't need to. This house knows how to hold grief. It has been doing it for years. It holds joy too. When there's joy to hold, holds it in the walls and the floors in the backyard where the dogwood blooms every April right on schedule, steady as anything, whether anyone is watching or not. I am watching. That is enough.